Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Paul Golan. I'm Executive Director of the Society for Humanistic Judaism, and Jews for a Secular Democracy is our pluralistic social justice initiative addressing separation of church and state issues through Jewish perspectives. And today is our second in a series, a monthly or near monthly series that we're calling Call With Us, where we advocate for positions and usually positions based around a current bill that's being considered in one or both um, uh, one or both houses of Congress. Um, on issues that we care about and that we connect to separation of church and state and Jewish values. So today we're going to be talking to our Congress people. We're going to actually make some calls about unmasking ICE, basically. I think everyone has seen that immigration enforcement officers have been covering their faces and not fully identifying who they are as they ramp up immigration enforcement. So I'm going to talk a bit about the specifics on what it is we're advocating for. But before I get into that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Sarah Levin, who is our strategy director for Jews for Secular Democracy, and she's the principal of Secular Strategies. And she's going to talk a bit about what is the best practices for actually making calls to your federal elected officials. And I'm just curious if anyone has never called your congressperson, senator in the past, if you will, first of all, there's no shame. I think most Americans have never called their congressional offices, so that's something that we're trying to address. If you can put it in the chat, it'll be interesting to see if this is your first time. And even if you're a seasoned veteran, I think some of the tips that we're going to share will be helpful. So I will turn it over now to Sarah to talk about how we actually make the calls, and then I'll come back and talk about what it is we're calling about today.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here to take time in your afternoons or whatever time zone you're in on a Thursday to call your members of Congress. That is activism. So just by showing up here, you are really making a difference. So thank you for taking the time. So one of the things before I get into the advocacy basics is just I like to remind folks that our elected officials work for us, right? Their salaries are paid by our taxpayer dollars. And so we are not being annoying or we are doing our jobs as members of a democracy where our elected officials represent us and we pay their salaries, right? So they should hear from you. And very often, when it comes to this kind of advocacy, and we'll talk about why phone calls are particularly impactful in a moment here, is that they're always hearing from people, right? And when you assume that the folks who agree with you, even if it's the majority of folks, are making those calls, you can't assume, right? The squeaky wheel gets the grease. Our opposition on these issues, who are pushing Christian nationalism, who are supporting masked ICE officers going around not identifying themselves and thinking that's okay. Those kinds of folks make calls too, right? So we want to make sure that there's not a vacuum, that people are hearing, that our members are hearing from us as well. And remember, they do work for you. So I like to say that because some folks get a little bit intimidated by the idea of calling a member of Congress, but I think it's helpful to remember that they do work for you. So your voice is your superpower. Every single call to a senator or representative is actually logged by their staff. I can tell you I was an intern in a U.S. Senate office, and my very intern job was to actually do the intake process. So there is a system in place where you actually log what the person called about, what the person emailed about, whether they were for or against, and then I would actually assign the correspondence if it was an email or if it was a phone call to go to the staffer that handles that issue. So there is actually an intake process in place where they track these things. So it's not just going into the ether. That is particularly important when there is a contentious issue, especially if a member is on the fence about where to go. they are paying very close attention when they're deciding on their vote on how many phone calls, how many times they've heard from constituents on one side of the issue versus the other. So it is tallied. I don't know if you all remember, this feels like forever ago, but when Betsy DeVos was confirmed as Secretary of Education, that had to be that was a tie-breaking vote on her nomination. And I remember at the time specifically the senators who were on the fence were talking about how many phone calls they were getting, right? So like that was really a moment where it could tip either way, and the amount of calls that members were getting on one side or the other really did matter. They were paying attention. So every call is tallied, know that. When you're calling, these are going to be actually pretty quick. Um, First, sorry, before you make the call, you have to find your elected officials. So if you don't know who your elected officials are, you have a U.S. senator, you have two representatives in the House, unless you are a DC or a Puerto Rican resident. So if you don't know who your U.S. senator is, you don't know who your, I'm sorry, two senators, one representative. If you don't know who those folks are, we do have the links in the Advocacy Basics document, and we can put it in the chat as well. If you get through to a person, you are going to introduce yourself. You're going to be polite. You're going to be peaceful. Don't at any point make threats, swear, otherwise harass staffers on the phone. I doubt anybody on this call would do that, but we just want to make sure you know that threats are taken very seriously, could be reported to law enforcement. And also, that's not how you get folks to listen to you, right? And you have to remember whoever is answering the phone, and this goes for if you ever go to an office in person as well, whoever's at the front, that person is a gatekeeper, right? They're the person who's going to determine whether your message gets through or not. So you want to be very, very polite and nice to that person, regardless of whether you think they might be an intern or low on the totem pole, which by the way, there's a lot of young people working in Congress. So just because they look young doesn't mean that they couldn't be the legislative director. But it doesn't really matter because again, whoever is that person picking up the phone, that person answering the door is the gatekeeper. So be very, very nice and polite to them. Um, if your call is not picked up, you're going to leave a voicemail. So it's going to be very similar to what you would be saying over the phone. The most important thing to start with is to make sure you name yourself and that you are a constituent. You can mention if you'd like where you live. So I might say if I was calling my rep that my name is Sarah Levin, I'm a constituent. I live in Montrose in California, because they will know the neighborhoods, right? Occasionally, they might ask for, if they do ask for your address, sometimes they do want to verify that you're a constituent. That might happen particularly with Senate offices because they get so much volume and they're not particularly interested in tracking non-constituent outreach as much. So don't be surprised if you do get asked that, and then just provide your address and just know that they're just going to use that to verify that you're a constituent. So you're going to make clear that you're a constituent, and then you're going to tell them what you're calling about. And Paul's going to go into the talking points. Um, we want to give, one or two reasons. The topic of your call for today, you're going to say, I'm calling today about the SAVE Act. And then you're going to state your ask, and you want to be really concise and direct. So you want to say something like, I'm calling about the SAVE Act because I'm concerned about
Visible act, visible,
excuse
not.
me. I'm so sorry. I'm looking at our advocacy doc from last time. So the visible act, you could say, I'm concerned about people walking around and arresting people without giving them their due process and identifying themselves. And we'll go into the talking points we have, but we're going to have one or two of those. And then if there's anything personal, something, we have our talking points that Paul's going to go through, but at the end of the day, the person on the other side is a person, right? And stories really move people. And when they feel the passion from you and they understand why it is impactful to you personally, that makes a really big difference. So we're going to go into the talking points about the Visible Act and what it does, and what you're urging the member or the senator to do, your representative or your senator to do. But if there is something that is personal to you, to your experience of why this matters to you, why you're so concerned, that's also something you should share as well. So again, you're introducing yourself, you're a constituent, you might want to mention where you live. I'm calling to about the Visible Act. one to two talking points. And then if there's something personal as to why it matters to you, adding that. And then that's pretty much, it's a very quick call. And you're going to thank them for your time. And then if you'd like, you can ask for a written response to your request or a call back. You can ask, will I be getting a written response, or will I be given a call back? And you can give them your number. That's if your call is picked up by a live person. If not, you're going to do exactly the same thing, but you're just going to leave a voicemail, and they do tally those as well. So just do exactly the same thing. It just might be a little bit less conversational. That being said, a lot of times, especially if it's a Senate office, but with most offices, they're fielding these calls all the time. So it may not be, even with a live person, very conversational. They might ask a question or not. That most likely they're going to listen. They're going to hear you out. They're going to thank you for calling, and they're going to mark you down. Maybe they might verify that you're a constituent. Um, so those are really the basics. We're going to be making three calls, right, to your two senators and your representative. Um, and what we're going to do is we're going to make those calls, and then we're going to come back and we're going to debrief and talk about how those went. Again, they should be pretty quick. It's not going to be a long conversation. The most important thing is you identify yourself as a constituent. You mention the topic and the bill that we're talking about, that you're urging your representative or your senators to support the Visible Act, and that you are your two talking points and your personal, if you have one, connection to the issue. I will quickly say that when we're calling your senators, we're talking about the Visible Act. And when you're calling your representative, we're talking about the No Secret Police Act. Did I get that right, Paul?
Yes.
Yes. So the Visible Act for your U.S. Senate offices, and the No Secret Police Act to your representative. I'm going to put that in the chat as well.
Mhm.
Are there any questions about how these calls go, or anybody who maybe made calls last time? Do you want to maybe share what your experience was like? Anything that was surprising, or gosh, it was so easy? No questions? Oh, Marlene, and then Beverly.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
I just want to say every time I've done it, they've been very polite and attentive because, yeah, they do need this information. And since I moved from a big city to a very small town, where I'm calling from is more important too, because I'm in a more uh, Republican area. So, but yeah, I wouldn't, you know, don't worry that they won't be nice. They'll be nice.
Mhm.
Yeah, they'll be nice. It's their job for sure.
So can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, so I live in Southern California. My representative is very liberal. And my senators, are both Democrats. So I'm kind of preaching to the choir when I call them. However, where I used to live in San Diego, um, we have a very right-wing representative. And someone suggested to me that I should use my old address in his district to try to boost the importance of my call. What do you think about that? We moved 2 years ago.
I see Katie fiercely shaking her head, and she used to work for an elected official. I would say likely no. They probably do have pretty up-to-date information about who their constituents are. And I think the idea that the assumption that, well, my reps are good on the issues, I don't need to call them, is a mistake, because it's not just, it doesn't mean that they won't necessarily be supportive, but there is a lot to be said about prioritizing issues, right? There are so many bills and there's so much going on that even if you have an ally on an issue, it doesn't mean they're going to be a champion. It doesn't mean it's the top of their radar. And so we are fighting to make sure that this issue is on their radar. And so if they're, imagine how many other people might feel the same way and think, oh gosh, well, they're great on these issues, so they don't need to hear from me. Well, if no one's calling their office saying it's really important to me that you support the Visible Act, then it's not going to be necessarily on their radar when they're thinking about where they're spending their time, where their office is spending their resources, because they can't spend their time on everything. There's a lot of issues to work on. So really, even when it comes to offices that are aligned with us, we're making sure, are you talking about this? Are you prioritizing this? Are you a co-sponsor? And that's something that's also in the chat here. Thank you for putting that in, Katie. So if you can look up if your senator and if your House rep is a co-sponsor. If they are already a co-sponsor, a great thing to do is to say thank you. I noticed that Senator so and so is a co-sponsor, that Representative so and so is a co-sponsor. I want to please thank them and let them know how much it means to me, right? That encouragement matters because again, it does that same thing of bumping up the priority list, right? I'm getting calls from constituents who are thanking me for co-sponsoring this. Clearly, it's something important, and that motivates them to continue to prioritize it. Because remember, besides their vote or co-sponsoring, there's a lot of other ways that elected officials can make a difference on an issue. They write op-eds, right? They go on the news cycle. They talk to reporters. They post on social media, and they have a really big platform to raise issues up in addition to their votes and their co-sponsorship. So we want to make sure that if they are a co-sponsor, that they're getting that recognition and getting motivated to continue to work on those issues. If they are not a co-sponsor, then that is the ask, right? We want them to support the bill and consider co-sponsoring.
Right. Great. So let me dive in very briefly and give a bit of background because odds are you're just going to say your few sentences and they will thank you. But if they ask you a question for a little bit more detail or background or why you care, this information may help inform that response or conversation that you might have. So as you may know, perhaps you're here because you know that Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, first of all, got a huge boost to their budget in the recent congressional budget. And what they've been doing on their raids searching for undocumented immigrants is concealing their personal identity by wearing masks and also not even showing their agency affiliation anywhere on their uniforms. And this causes confusion, fear, and mistrust. And there is no way to confirm that the person is who they're claiming to be. And in fact, there are already cases of unauthorized civilians imitating ICE agents to intimidate and terrorize people. So this is a really scary situation. So the Visible Act would amend the Immigration and Nationality Act to require all immigration enforcement officers to display visible identification during public-facing immigration enforcement actions and to promote transparency and accountability. And the No Secret Police Act in the House is a similar bill. And what it doesn't do, and this might be relevant if you have a Republican representative that whose office you're talking to, it does not limit immigration enforcement authority or tactics, which perhaps many of us wish it would. That's not the bill that we're talking about or the issue that we're talking about right now. What we're talking about is really advocacy for transparency around the actions that they're taking. Also, it does not apply if there are covert actions or non-public operations where they actually need to disguise or cover who they are. So this was introduced in the House by Representative Dan Goldman and in the Senate by Senator Alex Padilla. And there is no date for a vote on either of these. So one of the things you can ask for is, especially if they're already a co-sponsor, is can you please help bring this to a vote as soon as possible? Now, the excuse that's been used by ICE agents to, for the face coverings is to protect officers from getting doxxed, meaning being identified for online harassment. But there is no other law enforcement agency in the country that has done this, expressed similar concerns. Even at the height of Black Lives Matters, the police departments were not covering their faces. This is highly unusual, and it's an intimidation tactic, and it's a way to avoid accountability for wrongdoing. So really, we're asking for transparency and accountability. So, of course, we are a Jewish organization, and we're also focused on church-state separation. So I just want to touch on a couple of issues that relate to that. So obviously, I think we all know there are powerful historic reasons why Jews empathize with refugees and immigrants, because it's literally almost our entire history. And it is our our ideology in a lot of ways as well, whether it comes from a religious or a culturally Jewish perspective. There is no mitzvah repeated more often in the Torah than to welcome the stranger, for we were strangers in the land of Egypt. And that is one of the reasons why most Jews in America are supportive of um, welcoming refugees and immigrants into the United States in a fair process, and not mistreating those who are here. Also, the focus of these mass deportation efforts are very clearly against Black, brown, and Hispanic people. It's obviously racially motivated, and that is a big part of the goal of white Christian nationalism, which is what our initiative, Jews for Secular Democracy, is trying to push back against. The Department of Homeland Security social media has quoted the Bible in support of their work. There is a white Christian nationalist conspiracy theory that Jews are trying to inundate America with people of color as immigrants, which is why you may recall when there was a neo-Nazi march in Charlottesville, they were chanting, "Jews will not replace us," right? And it wasn't immediately clear to a lot of people, why were they chanting that? And what it was a reference to this conspiracy theory that Jews are opening the gates of immigration specifically to people of color in America to reduce the number of white people in America. Another point I would think about, I wouldn't necessarily bring up any of these things, but just so we have a background of why this relates to our work. You know, for many of us in our parents' or grandparents' lifetime, we have experienced as Jews the rise of fascism through police states that were powered by paramilitaries operating on the orders of a single leader with little to no government oversight, right? And it is scary, and I don't think completely alarmist to see parallels in first of all, ICE just got a budget larger than the US Marines. They are not showing their faces or identifying their agency. There are aspects of this that should be very scary for people who understand history and the rise of authoritarianism. So that is some of the background. As for the ask, as already mentioned, we're going to first determine whether your representative or senators that you're going to call are already co-sponsors. You're going to start your calls with, "Hi, my name is," your name, "and I'm a constituent from where you're calling from." And if they are a co-sponsor, you're saying, "I'm calling to thank them for co-sponsoring either the Visible Act or the No Secret Police Act." If they're not, you're going to ask them, "I'm calling to encourage the representative to co-sponsor the No Secret Police Act," or "I'm calling to ask the senator to co-sponsor the Visible Act." And then you can give the background in a sentence or two of what this is. It was recently introduced by the senators. It will amend the Immigration and Nationality Act. It will not limit their authority. The text is in a link in the chat. I always encourage you to use your own words if that feels more natural to you, or read it as is, or do some hybrid of one and the other. It should just be a few sentences and see what they say. Even if it is a rep or senator who is not going to be friendly to this. They will be polite. They will say, you know, we hear you and we're noting that, and go from there. So any questions about this, about the background? So what we will do is stay on this webinar, mute ourselves, all go make 3 phone calls. I think it won't take more than 7 minutes, 7 or 8 minutes. And then we'll come back here and talk about how it went and then go on with our day, having done a really important good deed. So I'm going on mute. I'm going to find the phone numbers for my reps and senators, and we'll be back in 7 or 8 minutes.
And I told
Connie?
him, very sweet, nice.
Connie, go
Okay.
ahead.
Well, I called Juan Ciscomani's office. It went to a central operator, I guess they still call him that, who then transfers me to the office. And then the recording asks what you want. I said, I'd like to leave a message for my representative. And then the phone sounds like somebody picked up the phone and then hung up on me. So that
Oh, no.
and not easy to get to that point, making it his, I don't know if it's intentionally making it more difficult, or if on the phone ID it says Democrat, Democrats calling, I don't know.
No, they wouldn't know that,
I
but
know, I'm joking, but yeah. And then I did get through to I'm not getting their names. I got tongue-tied too a little bit. I didn't last time when I did this, but I did today. So I got through our junior rep's office. That was a recording, but it was his own voice. And then I got through Mark Kelly's office. That was a real person.
oh, great.
And she only wanted my zip code.
Uh-huh.
And it was the same message that we're sharing. But I really did think that my Republican representative just was making it difficult. And I heard somebody say that on on our first call with me thing.
That's
Saying,
fascinating. Well, call him back. Be annoying. I mean, you know,
oh, I
if
know how to do that.
yeah, okay, yeah. Right. It seems like the reps, because they're serving less people, are able to have staff that are live versus certainly the senators in my state of New York. I just got answering machines for both of them. But we do trust that they will mark it down, um, because they care about what their actual constituents want. And so
Just
anyone
add
else? Yeah.
So just really quickly to that, Connie, I've had the experience where I've gotten through and I can hear somebody picking up the phone and then it cuts off, and then I've called back and somebody picks up. Sometimes, like literally, I don't know if you've ever dealt with one of those phones where you have multiple lines, but when you switch lines, you hang up. That does happen. So it is worth it, especially if something weird like that happens where like it hangs up right away. It is worth just calling right back because sometimes that's just someone messing up on the phones too.
That's a nice way to give them the benefit of the doubt. So I
Be
appreciate
benefit of
that.
the doubt. It does happen. It's happened to me.
Anyone else want to share their experience? Marlene?
Yeah, I was actually able to talk to a person at Senator Alsobrook's office in Maryland, as well as House Member Steny Hoyer. I think Alsobrook's because she's new, maybe that's what they're doing. But I found both Hoyer's office and Alsobrook's really interested. And I said that neither of them are sponsors, and it would be great that they'd be sponsors because I know that they're interested in immigration issues in other ways. So, but I did get a chance to have conversations. And then I left a message for Chris Van Hollen, but I know he's a sponsor. And I thanked him for being part of the group that sat down in front of the Baltimore Detention Center Friday, because they, as a group of 5 or 6 senators and representatives, went there to visit the detention center. They said they were coming and they never got past the front door. They just sat at the door.
Wow. Well, that's great. And it, I saw that there was a question Joan had asked in the chat whether it's worth calling more than once. And the good answer was from Sarah was that probably not on this exact thing, the exact request, but when if and when this actually ever comes to a vote, then it's a different request. Then you're saying vote yes on instead of right now, which is co-sponsor and help bring this to a vote. There are so many bills that don't even get brought to a vote. So this one, we hope that it will. And once we hear that it is, we may do another one where we can call and say, hey, we really want you to vote yes on this. We'll see. Obviously, there would need to be some Republicans who also would have the courage to vote yes on this. So we're a long ways off, but we've made our voice heard on this issue. So I want to thank all of you for coming today and for participating.
Before you close,
Yep.
can I say one more thing because I want to highlight something Marlene said. So Marlene, it sounds like the response you got is you had new offices or offices that were interested, but they weren't co-sponsors yet, right? So
Right.
imagine if there's 10 more people from Maryland that call their office in the next few days around the same issue, that could make the difference between whether that gets up to the boss as a recommendation to co-sponsor. Because a lot of times, especially with our allies, again, they just have so much in front of them that even bills that they haven't co-sponsored, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't support the issue. It just maybe hasn't risen to the top, right? So if I know you're part of Mahar and you have a lot of network in Maryland, so if you could get more people to make that same call this week, since it is fresh in that staffer's mind, that could make the difference on whether during the weekly brief with the boss, they say, we got 10 calls this week from constituents. We think you should add your name to this bill. And it's probably going to be a very easy lift, but it's those calls that make it kind of rise to that chain of command because of the volume. So I just wanted to add that's the impact right there to what I think Beverly was saying earlier of like, what's the point of doing this for the members that already support our issues? That's why, because even our allies may not even have this on their radar, may not be co-sponsors yet, but they certainly will be if they get 10 calls from constituents.
Great
Thanks.
point.
That's a really good point. I will spread the word. Also, at Alsobrook's office, I found out they had my old Silver Spring address, and she said, this doesn't match the zip code you gave me. So I gave her the new one. I thought that's really important too, for them to know now I'm in rural Southern Maryland and somebody there is interested, not just Silver Spring, where everybody might be on your side.
That's remarkable that she called that up that quickly. That's great. It's great to know and kind of proves the point. Well, thank you all so much. We have, I believe, 2 webinars on various topics from Jews for Secular Democracy coming up before we do another call with us again. But I'm presuming you all are here because you're already receiving our emails. So just keep looking out for them and we will let you know when the next one will be. But we have a webinar in August, a webinar early September, and then we'll do another call with us. So thank you all so much for being here and have a good couple of weeks till we see you again. Take care.
Do you have a second? Do you have one
Yes.
second, Paul?
Sure. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.